Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on our digital lives. We're going to look at the invisible code that's constantly shaping our choices, our feelings, and, even our sense of what's real. We're going to break down the whole system, starting with your own ancient brain and going all the way to the architecture of the apps on your phone. I mean, have you ever had that feeling? You look up from your phone and realize an entire hour has just vanished? That's not an accident. It's by design. And it brings up a huge question. Who or what is really steering the ship? All right, let's get into it. To really get a handle on our digital world, we first have to understand the original operating system, the one that's been running inside our heads for thousands and thousands of years. This is our mind's backend. So, what do I mean by backend? Well, it's not the buttons and screens we see every day. It's the mind's underlying code, those deep fundamental processes that are running the show pretty much all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Now, a key part of that ancient software is something called motivated reasoning. We all love to think our mind is like an impartial judge, carefully weighing evidence to find the absolute truth. But it turns out, cognitive science shows that most of the time, our brain acts more like a determined lawyer. It starts with the belief it already has, and its first question is, okay, how can I build the most rock-solid case to defend this? And this is where it gets really interesting. When you look at the brain science, it's wild. Neuroscientists put people in brain scanners and found that when they successfully argued away information that contradicted their beliefs, the brain's reward circuit fired up. Yep, the same area that gives us that jolt of pleasure from, say, delicious food or winning some money. So defending what we already think is true is biologically rewarding. It feels good. And it's not just our reasoning that's pre-programmed. Another huge piece of our core operating system is archetypes. And no, these aren't just characters in movies. They're basically evolved mental shortcuts that get us ready for common human experiences. Our deep need for care gives us the caretaker archetype to help us find protectors, while the threat of being taken advantage of gives us the cheater archetype to help us spot danger. Our brains come pre-wired with these patterns. So if our ancient mind is the back end, then you can think of the digital world, social media, the internet, all of it, as this incredibly powerful front end that plugs directly into it. Let's take a look at how that connection actually works. To understand this new interface, we need its codebook. And that codebook is a field called semiotics. It's basically the ultimate decoder ring for culture. It helps us understand how we create meaning out of, well, pretty much everything. For instance, there's nothing inherently stop about the color red. We just all agreed that a red light means stop. The like button is another perfect example. It's just a symbol, a little thumbs up, but we've all agreed it means approval, connection, even social status. Semiotics decodes those hidden agreements. And you can see these codes in action absolutely everywhere. Take these two examples, a video game objective and a political slogan. A simple instruction like "Save the Princess" works in almost the exact same way as a slogan like "Build the Wall." Both of them are what you'd call a narrative mechanic. They aren't complex arguments, they're simple, powerful instructions that give a whole group of people a clear goal and get them ready to act. So here's the crucial point. These digital spaces are not neutral. They're engineered environments. Every single app has an invisible architecture, a psychological blueprint designed to steer our behavior. Cyber-psychologist John Suhler identified 8 key dimensions of this architecture. Think of each one like a dial that designers can turn up or down to create a very specific kind of psychological space. We won't go through all of them, but let's look at a couple of quick examples. Okay, let's take the identity dimension. On a site like Reddit, anonymity turns that identity dial way, way down. And so the space becomes all about ideas and hobbies. On LinkedIn, you have to use your real name. So that dial is turned all the way up, demanding your most professional, buttoned-up self. It's the same person, but you get completely different behavior just because of one architectural choice. And the exact same thing goes for the temporal dimension, the dimension of time. Think about Snapchat with its disappearing messages. It creates this playful, low-pressure vibe, right? But then you have a Facebook wall that feels permanent, like a public record. So what do? We become more careful, more curated. The architecture itself is literally programming how we behave in that space. So, what happens when our ancient, slow-moving brain starts living inside this new, high-speed digital architecture? Well, that mismatch creates some very predictable glitches in the system. One of the biggest, most obvious glitches is just how easily misinformation can hijack our mental operating system.
The Ames model breaks it down into 4 stages. First, it starts with defective input, something like a deepfake video or a totally fabricated but convincing news story. Then, our own biases, remember that inner lawyer, corrupt how we process it. Next, it exploits our flawed memory, which is shockingly easy to alter. And finally, in the digital age, a lie can spread to millions of people faster than any correction ever could.
Another major glitch actually affects our very sense of self. It's that feeling of being mentally exhausted because the architecture of these platforms demands that we constantly perform different versions of ourselves. Our professional self on LinkedIn, our perfect parent self on Facebook, our witty, anonymous self on Reddit. Psychologists call this the saturated self. And if you want to spot it in your own life, just notice that feeling of relief when you finally close all the apps. That feeling, that's the weight of the saturated self lifting off of you.
But it's not all glitches and problems. This new interface can also offer some really powerful solutions to very old problems, like loneliness. And the potential here is undeniable. A program in New York gave AI companion robots to over 800 seniors, and an incredible 95% of them said they felt less lonely. The positive impact can be huge, and it can be immediate. But here's the paradox. Sociologist Sherry Turkle saw this danger years ago. These AIs offer companionship, but without any of the demands of a real friendship. And real, messy, complicated human relationships, well, they just can't compete with that. The short-term fix can actually make the long-term problem worse by letting our real-world social skills and even our empathy just start to wither away. So it all might feel a little bit hopeless, but it's not. The moment you understand how the system works, you can start to navigate it more consciously. The solution isn't to just unplug forever. It's to become a better steersman. And this whole idea of steering is more connected than you might think. The word cyber literally has nothing to do with computers. It comes from an ancient Greek word for steersman, the person guiding a ship. So cybernetics is really the art of how we steer ourselves. And that's the goal, to consciously navigate this front-end world without getting pulled off course by every current. A huge part of steering better is defending your own information machine. So here's a 4-point toolkit that gives you a practical defense. First, detect if it's contradicted somewhere else. Second, scrutinize the messenger. Why are they sharing this? What do they gain? Third, spot your own biases. Ask yourself, am I accepting this because it's true or just because it feels true? And finally, for the really important facts, rely on external records, not your own easily altered memory. And this toolkit leads to a bigger, more important mind shift. We need to abandon the old, broken question, is this true? In today's world, that is a dangerously flawed starting point. The path forward is about asking better questions, like these. Where did this information come from? And who agrees on this? Shifting from the idea of absolute certainty to the idea of consensus is one of the most powerful ways you can become a better steersman. Ultimately, all of these systems, the apps, the memes, the narratives, they're all built on symbols and stories that we collectively create and agree on. And that means we don't have to just be passive users. We have the power to question, to interpret, and even to help rewrite the code. So I'll just leave you with this. In a world full of algorithms and architectures all fighting for your attention, seeing the code gives you a choice. What will you do with it?